Yesterday, I sold my wedding ring and drained our savings so that we can have the money to file bankruptcy.
OMG.
I'm here now waiting for my appointment at 10.
She is at the attorney's office, cash in hand, ready to file bankruptcy. What's going on, friend?
We've been debating on doing this for a while, but today's the day we're actually going to do it. And it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks before we sign and everything's a done deal.
Wow. I wonder if she goes into why and which chapter. Maybe a chapter 7 or chapter 13.
We thought long and hard about this, and we feel like that's the only way that we can get some relief. My husband's not very happy about the fact that I sold my ring, but we needed the money quick, and I wanted to be able to pay in full today. He's not happy with me, and he's also not happy that we have no more savings now. It's gone. We're going to be doing a chapter 7, and so we're going to keep the house and car.
They're filing a chapter 7, her and her husband. She sold her wedding ring to get the cash quick. What most people don't think about when filing bankruptcy is that there is a cost associated with it. And it could be anywhere from $1,000 to a few $1,000s. We're not talking a small sum of money. And she's ready. I'm curious to know why it's not her and her husband going into this attorney's office, but she seems like she is very certain in her decision. But you can also see just from body language and facial that it wasn't a decision that she made lightly.
It's kind of given us a fresh start, which is what we need, because I have been stressing out of my mind over the amount of bills and debt.
The way that I sometimes think about financial burden is like, have you ever seen someone get pushed in a pool and they can't really swim? It's immediate panic, right? It's like, oh my God, how do I get out of this situation? And oftentimes when people are at that fine line of my family and I need to file for bankruptcy, that's what it feels like. It feels like you've been pushed into a pool and you don't know how to swim.
I'm super grateful for the little bit of money I've been making here on TikTok. That's going to be a big help.
And bankruptcy is that life preserver. It's that lifeguard that comes up and throws you that donut ring to get you out of the pool.
Try to build our savings back up, because we currently, our floor in our house in one spot is about to fall through because trailers are made like trash. And the only thing holding it up is the little vinyl flooring right now. I can feel that the hole's gotten worse, and I'm scared I'm about to break through it, all from a water leak. So we need to build that savings up quick so that when that floor breaks through, that we're able to fix it. I'm really grateful for the little bit of money I've been making here on TikTok in the past week. It's not much.
So, I'm happy that she's able to find relief in filing bankruptcy. I can appreciate the fact that she is not taking this decision lightly, but it just does seem like, based on everything she has going on that she shared, it's a done deal and she absolutely needs to file. One thing that I will mention, there's typically 2 types, Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Now with Chapter 7, that's often called like a liquidation, whereas the Chapter 13 is more of a reorganization. Chapter 7 is the one that's most common for individuals, and it's essentially designed for those with little to no income who cannot afford to repay their debts. What most people like about Chapter 7 is that you can designate certain things to keep or exclude from the bankruptcy proceedings. So this young lady was talking about wanting to keep, I think it was her house and her car, and then some of more of like the unsecured debt, maybe like credit cards, personal loans, and things like that is what she's including in the bankruptcy. Shout out to anybody who's willing to come onto TikTok and share their story. Being at that point, like I mentioned, at that fine line where you're like, okay, I got to go ahead and do this thing, is not a easy decision.
But the people who have filed for bankruptcy and regret it or don't regret it, please come to the front. Because I started off last year with $40,000 worth of credit card debt, and now I probably have about $24,000.
She's made quite a bit of progress in paying off her debt. Let's see how she's feeling, because why are you considering bankruptcy if you're making progress?
I'm paying the people. I do not want to pay off debt anymore. I only want to pay the minimum balance.
That feeling is so real. Like, the way that it's so easy to stack up debt and spend money, you can do that in your sleep, right? But when it comes to being disciplined enough and consistent enough to pay your debt off, it feels like sometimes you're moving at a snail's pace. I feel on that one.
Pay that. I don't have it. So I have been thinking about filing for bankruptcy. But I'm like, I don't want that on my credit. Mind you, I already have a house. I already have a car. I already have credit cards. I don't know, like, I need to do research about what are all the pros and cons.
She mentioned some really good things when it comes to considering filing for bankruptcy and like the potential pros and cons, as she stated. Oftentimes people get spooked about the idea of filing for bankruptcy because it does negatively impact your credit, period. Bottom line, don't let nobody lie to you and tell you something different. Now, what is more nuanced is how it impacts your credit and the severity of it impacting your credit. And in that part, those two pieces is going to vary person by person. It's not a one size fits all. But what you can expect is that bankruptcy will be on your credit report. So for someone that maybe has their house already, has their car, has the credit cards that they will intend to acquire, and don't really foresee needing to get any additional credit within the next 5, 7, 10 years. I'm not saying do it. I'm not saying don't, because I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just saying I can see how it might be. This might not be a bad idea. You know what I'm saying? For somebody who already has those things. Now, if you are younger or you're right at 2 to 3 years from wanting to buy a house, needing to get a new car, also if you're needing to get an apartment, if you are looking for a new job where your credit may need to be ran for employment purposes, then that cons list might look a little bit longer when it comes to assessing whether or not to file bankruptcy, because what is for certain is that bankruptcy is going to show up on your credit, and it is not going to be viewed positively by no stretch of the imagination. That's definitely something to take into consideration. What will you need your credit for within the next 5, 7, 10 years if you are considering filing for bankruptcy? Okay?
Because if I think about over the next year, me using of the money that I'm going to get to go towards that, it drives me crazy. No, I want to take a trip somewhere. And
okay, wait, friend. Because I was with you until you said take a trip. I was with you until you said take a trip, because what immediately comes to mind, and oftentimes what people fail to really take account of when they're at that decision of do I or don't I file for bankruptcy? Listen, you can file for bankruptcy and then in 5 years land yourself right back in the same situation if your behavior, your spending patterns, your habits don't change, right? Bankruptcy filing and the relief you get from not having to pay that debt anymore is not a band-aid for you to just, okay, that's wrapped up. Now let me go back and do the same things I was doing before. Doing the same thing and expecting a different result or not thinking about the result is a recipe for disaster. Like, that's what people call insanity. If she was of the mindset where it's like, okay, I'm going to file for bankruptcy and I'm going to have $20,000 over the next 2 years from not having to pay down my credit cards. I'm going to take, maybe like $1,000, $1,500 of that, and I'm going to go on a trip. Cool, right? Cool. And I'm going to take the rest of it and I'm going to dump it in investing and I'm going to dump it in savings. Now we talking. Because at that point, she's setting herself up for greatness. Now that she has all this cash liquid that she's not distributing to credit cards, it makes sense. Put some investments, put some in savings, spend just a little bit now. Just a little bit. Spend just a little bit on yourself. Don't go crazy. And then what's most important is when you come back from that trip, mama, let's work on improving our spending habits and our spending behaviors, right? And this is all hypothetical. I'm not saying this is her situation, but immediately when she said go on a trip, I was triggered. I wanted to just toss that little tidbit to her.
7 years is a long time. I know you have chapter 7 and chapter 11. I didn't do my research, but I just want to know, if you have done it, do you regret it?
I personally have never filed for bankruptcy, but I've worked with clients who have made the decision to file, and it really just depends on your scenario and your circumstances. One thing that I do want to mention, because she was talking about chapter 7 and she actually mentioned chapter 11, which is more for businesses, as opposed to chapter 13, which is more for individuals. For chapter 13, that's more reorganization. This is for individuals with regular income who can repay part of their debts over time. Chapter 13 is not going to completely wipe your debts. It's essentially giving you a plan to pay off your debt. Chapter 13, that's seen as slightly more favorable from a entity or institution that's looking at your credit profile as opposed to a Chapter 7. Because Chapter 7 is just saying, like, I want y'all to get rid of all this. Get rid of it all so I don't have to pay. Versus 13 is like, okay, I do have the money coming in. I just need some help, like maybe changing up my payments so that I can effectively pay over time while still being able to afford my bills and things like that.
Bankruptcy is such a hush thing to talk about. I filed bankruptcy and it was the best decision that I ever made.
So this is someone who actually filed, and she's saying it was a great decision.
People who are struggling so bad with debt and they're trying to make plans to get out of it. You haven't even looked into bankruptcy. Let me give you the lowdown.
There isn't necessarily a percentage of your debt to income ratio or your debt utilization ratio where it's like, okay, this is going to trigger a need for someone to file bankruptcy. Like I said before, it's not a one size fits all. But I will say some key indicators of like you at least maybe need to think about it as an option is if you are unable to make on-time payments consistently, like if you're missing payments month after month, if you are down to only having enough money for your essentials, but you also have a bunch of credit card debt and minimum monthly payments that you can't afford to make, if you are in a situation where you have essentially more debt than you can manage, what I will say is crunch your numbers and make an informed decision based on your finances and not necessarily your feelings. Once you have the numbers, you can take a step back and assess some of those more external factors. Are you looking to buy a house, looking to buy a car? Are you looking to maybe find a new job where they need to run your credit for employment? Are you looking for potential insurance? Oftentimes insurance companies will get your social and run your credit, apartments. And there's so many other factors outside of just a house and a car where institutions will run your credit. If you're looking to do any of those things within the next few years, 6 months, 3 months, whatever the case may be, that may be a reason why you do or why you don't. But at first, if you don't do nothing else, run your numbers. Before you get to bankruptcy, people can oftentimes make some adjustments in their spending and be a-okay and just be diligent about paying off their debt. I don't want to encourage people to file for bankruptcy prematurely. What needs to happen is do an audit of your finances, crunch the numbers, create a debt profile, understand all the types of debts, the amounts, the minimum balances, your credit limit available. I'll put a video in the description and maybe link it above where I talk about actually paying down your debt and how to create a debt profile. But there's so many steps before you get to the bankruptcy. Like, don't just hop to it prematurely. It's important to get your finances in order because when you go to speak to an attorney, they're going to ask you about your finances. You're going to have to submit all of your financial records, sit down and run through it yourself so that you at least are able to make an informed decision based on the finances and not your feelings.
Years ago, we're about $50,000 into debt. And we had our second child. We had to put him in daycare. So we had 2 in daycare. We were living in an apartment. We were just suffocated with all these credit cards and loans. You cannot write off student loans. I didn't have any anyway.
So she mentioned something. Student loans is the debt that will forever be over you unless you pay it off. Bottom line, what I'm figuring out in my financial journey, helping others, helping myself, and doing research on different topics as I create this YouTube channel is that student loans, you can't discharge them in bankruptcy. What I also learned recently is when you are creating a will for yourself, oftentimes the student loan will carry into a debt that you have to pay off even when you're no longer here. So like whoever your beneficiaries are, they may need to pay off your student loans. So it's just one of those debts that you cannot get rid of at all. And that sucks.
But it was just like never ending. The interest, like we would make a payment, it would just all go to interest. It was just exhausting. We were so consumed by debt. We knew somebody close to us who filed. She was like, reach out to this guy. We reached out to the lawyer. We were trying to do a debt consolidation thing. And we were just like throwing our money down the shitter. Like it was just not going anywhere. Our debt wasn't going anywhere.
She mentioned debt consolidation because that's another one of those steps before you get to bankruptcy. What I would suggest is that you exhaust all options before filing for bankruptcy, right? Do the audit, change your behavior, be a little bit more intentional with your spending as much as possible to save up money to actually pay down your debt. And then after all that, look at debt consolidation avenues, maybe zero balance transfers and things like that. Explore our options. If you find you're able to make progress but not nearly enough progress to keep you afloat, then it's like, okay, I did everything I could possibly do. Now let's explore this option. I would caution people from jumping to bankruptcy prematurely. If you need to do it and you know absolutely without a doubt, then by all means, but don't be afraid to explore the options before and then file if you need to.
Call this guy. So we call a lawyer. We pay like $400 or $500 to do the filing, and then we pay him like $1,500. Bada bing, bada boom. A few months later, we have no debt. We have everything's wiped clean. Our credit score plummets to 525, but who gives a because 2 years later, we buy our first home. We had the income to do it, and we had job history.
It was a really good decision for her and her family. It seemed like things went fairly smoothly, so shout out to her. She said 3 things to know before filing bankruptcy. Let's see her experience.
At the age of 20, it's almost been a year now, and I wanted to just give you guys 3 things that
So she filed young. I have so many questions. Okay, let's watch.
I definitely think everyone should know before they even think about filing bankruptcy or before they just file. Number 1 is that bankruptcy does not get rid of everything. And a lot of people think, oh, filing bankruptcy just gets rid. It eliminates all your debt. That is not true. Please do not file bankruptcy thinking everything's going to get erased. It erases your consumer debt. But if you have things like student loans, that does not get erased. Don't let that be confused.
Now listen, she the second person that done said them student loans gonna be there whether you like it or not. And that's facts. Until Congress passes some type of legislation or laws allowing student loans to be included, they cannot be included in bankruptcy proceedings.
At a college. I had a balance at my old college. It was a couple $1,000s. That was erased. Balances are erased, but my student loans were not. Something to keep in mind. I don't have child support, so I don't exactly understand how that works, but child support cannot be erased from bankruptcy, and certain taxes cannot be erased from bankruptcy.
And I also think alimony, like child support, alimony, tax debt or taxes due, things like that cannot be excluded. She's making some really good points, and she's pointing out some more nuanced things that people don't always consider. The other thing to keep in mind when it comes to bankruptcy that people don't be telling you is that there are certain, when you go sit down with an attorney, there are certain tests, like what they call a means test, that you have to meet before you get approved to file for bankruptcy. And the means test essentially is just some calculations of your income, your expenses, compared to like averages and median income, household incomes. When you deliver your financial documents to an attorney, they will calculate the means test for you to determine if you're getting approved for either Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. Couple other things when it comes to the process. Credit counseling is often mandatory. So you must complete credit counseling from a government approved agency, oftentimes within 80 days before you're filing. It's very, 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 very highly recommended that you hire an attorney to actually file because the bankruptcy law is complex and a qualified attorney will help you avoid any mistakes. Then ultimately what happens is the attorney will file a petition in bankruptcy court, and it will include the necessary paperwork about your income, expenses, debts, assets, and your financial history. Most times that filing of the petition triggers the automatic stay. That means the creditors must stop their collection action. So at that point, the creditors that you are associated with receive notice that like, hey, this person has filed for bankruptcy. Don't be asking for no more money until we get to the end of this, essentially. And then you have a meeting of creditors. That's also called a 341 hearing. You will essentially attend this short meeting with the bankruptcy trustee and answer questions under oath. Sometimes creditors can attend, but they rarely do for individual filings because they will be in meetings all day, every day, if that was the case. Then after the 341 hearing, there's a trustee review. There's a financial management course. Oftentimes you must complete a second course on personal financial management to receive an actual bankruptcy discharge, meaning the debt has been wiped away. The next step is just a discharge of debts after you've completed the financial management course. Now for Chapter 7, eligible debts are discharged typically within 3 to 4 months. So I say that to say, oftentimes this process does not take years. It can take 6 months from start to finish, sometimes even less than that. Now with a Chapter 13, hear me clearly, discharge comes after completing a 3 to 5 year repayment plan. So like I mentioned earlier, Chapter 13 is not completely wiping away all your debt. Chapter 13 is you saying, hey, I have the money, but I just need some stuff reorganized to make it work so that I can actually pay down and pay off my debt. So for the Chapter 13, they want to see that over the span of 3 to 5 years, you've been effectively repaying and adhering to the repayment plan that they give you. And as I mentioned earlier, the cost for Chapter 7 can range anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500. It's likely going to be at the very minimum $1,000, but it can also go up. For Chapter 13, it's a little more expensive, typically ranging from 3 to 5 bands. With Chapter 13, your attorney fees sometimes can be included in the repayment plan, where you don't necessarily have to pay your attorneys up front, or like all one lump sum, if you will. And then, of course, there's court filing fees for both the Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. That's a little bit of like a breakdown. I can do a more educational or like talking head video, but I wanted to give you those key things. All right. She was saying some good stuff, so let's like watch a little bit more.
Do your research. Make sure you speak to an attorney about your specific situation. Number 2, your credit is going to bounce back way sooner than you think. Before I filed, I was researching a lot and watching videos of people saying that takes about 6 months to build your credit back up or get approved for anything. Day after I filed, my credit score went up. I can't remember if it was 40 or 60 points, something like that. It went up crazy. I'm like, oh, my credit score went up. But then it went back down. After I got my discharge papers in the mail, I immediately applied for the Indigo MasterCard, which I've talked about
I'm triggered because my immediate question to her, if I was her financial mentor or strategist, I would ask her why she needed to file for that credit card. Why does she feel like she needed to get it? Is it because that is going to be her one credit card that she uses now that the other ones were discharged? And then why is she doing it so soon after filing for bankruptcy? It's not necessarily good or bad. It's just some yellow flag indicators for me. I would definitely ask her that. Because honestly, once you file for bankruptcy, best practice is to live very liquid for a little bit of time. Don't file for bankruptcy and then jump right back into getting a whole bunch of credit cards, because it's like, what are we doing, friend? Right? That's my immediate thought. And so, and she was right or she's wrong for doing it. But just given my experience in knowing human behavior, I wouldn't want her to set herself up for failure and be back in this position in 6 months.
Please do not get that. Do not get that card. I'd say try out Capital One, because I also got approved for Capital One.
I'm not saying don't get credit. I'm not opposed to having credit cards at all, because I have them and I use them. They are helpful, but you got to do it strategically, right? You got to do it intentionally and strategically. If y'all don't know nothing else from Gage Street, y'all know when it comes to handling your money, you can do anything you want, but do it strategically and intentionally, period.
The ugly side of bankruptcy. Even though it did change my life and give me a fresh start, it came with some baggage. I would say my credit score initially dropped maybe 120 points.
Let me come back to the mic. That's a lot, and I'm not surprised. Both things can be true at the same time. 120 points is diabolical. Hold on. Let me, I want to just show y'all. Let's look at the FICO credit ranges. Because dropping 120 points will move you from one range down to a couple ranges. Okay, let me show you this real quick. Okay, so boom. These are the 5 different ranges when it comes to your credit score. First, you have poor, which is 300 to 579. Then you have fair, 580 to 669. You have good from 670 to 739. Very good from 740 to 799. And then exceptional, which is anything above 800 up to 850, right? So your credit score range is from 300 to 850. Now, I've never met anybody with a 300 credit score. That is wild. But it's just saying it out loud. It's wild. But if he's saying his has dropped 120 points, let's see, if you had an 800 credit score and it dropped, hold on, I'm about to do some math. Now, mind you, if you got an 800 credit score, you're probably not filing for bankruptcy, but let's just play the hypotheticals. Minus 120, you are now down to 680, okay? Now, most people are in like the 670 to 739 range. They're in like the good range. So let's be generous and say you have a credit score of 739. So you're at the top end of the good. And then it drops 120. You're now at a 619. So you're sitting in fair. Now, let's say most people who file for bankruptcy actually in the fair range. So let's do that. Okay. So you got a 569, and you drop 120 points. You are now at a 549. You drop from fair to poor. That is wild. That 120 points is a lot.
Can drop up to 200. It really just depends. But it doesn't mean you can't recover. Right now, I'm about a 650 to 680, depending on the bureau. Don't be afraid of your credit score initially tanking. Another downside is that landlords may not want to rent to you because of your bank.
What did I tell you about these apartments? If you are looking, and that's something that happens a lot more frequently, like moving to different apartments as opposed to buying a house or buying a car. So those are the more frequent activities that oftentimes people who file for bankruptcy don't necessarily consider. It's going to be difficult for you to get approved for an apartment. Maybe you might need a cosigner. Maybe you get denied outright without them even giving you the option for a cosigner. It can be difficult to actually get an apartment. Imagine if someone files for bankruptcy, then they need to move in 6 months, and it pops up on their credit, and now they can't move into an apartment. So they ain't got no roof over their head. That would be a bad thing.
That being said, I live in LA, and I was apartment hunting recently, and only 1 to 2 out of 10 landlords would say no. In my experience, they're really just looking for income and no evictions. Another downside would probably be car financing. The reality is you could probably see APRs up to 20%, but that doesn't mean you can't get a vehicle, and there are things like cosigners that can help you get approved.
Bankruptcy and filing for bankruptcy is not going to prevent you from being able to do all of these things that he's mentioning, right? However, you will probably pay more if you can do them by yourself. And if you can't do them by yourself, you will still likely pay more, but you will also need a cosigner. A lot of us don't necessarily have people in our lives where we could just be like, hey, can you co-sign for this? Or hey, can you co-sign for that? Because oftentimes people don't want to co-sign, especially if they know you filed bankruptcy, because that is a huge red flag. So I see what he's saying, and he's not wrong. I just want to throw a little nuance in there where it's like, yes, you can do these things, but oftentimes it's going to be significantly more difficult, and you're going to be paying for your previous choices of filing for bankruptcy. Because ultimately, from a company, an institution, an apartment, like a leasing office perspective, an employer, you're seen as more risky. Like me, for example, someone who is an accountant, right? Someone who is a forensic accountant, someone who deals with corporate monies, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, who went to school for accounting, bachelor's and master's. If I ever was in the unfortunate situation of needing to file for bankruptcy, I would have a horrible time trying to find a job. I already know, just given my background. Girl, if you can't get your own monies together, how you gonna find out who's stealing from us? Filing for bankruptcy is definitely a personal choice. It should not be taken lightly. You should run the numbers of your finances to see where things are at to make an informed decision based on the numbers and not how you're feeling or the aspirational life that you want to live. That's the first point. The other point when it comes to filing for bankruptcy is sweetie pie, honey bun. If you don't do nothing else, change your behavior. That should actually start before you even file, honestly, because the changes don't happen overnight, but they absolutely must happen so that you don't lay yourself back in the same position. Most importantly, do your research when it comes to the different pros and cons, as one of the young ladies was talking about in the earlier video. Weigh your pros and cons. If you got to get out a notepad and write them down, if you need to talk to a spouse to think through some things, don't make the decision prematurely and don't make the decision hastily, right? Because it is something that will follow you for quite some time. And yes, it is not the end all be all when it comes to like, the sky is not going to fall if you decide to file for bankruptcy. However, I do want you to know, because I'm not going to sugarcoat, it's going to be significantly more difficult in some instances to get the things that comes with having credit. And if it's easy, then you oftentimes you're going to pay more than what an average person who didn't file for bankruptcy is paying. And then you also won't necessarily have much negotiating power when it comes to interest rates and things like that, because you're seen as a high risky borrower, essentially. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on file for bankruptcy. Watch my video below where I talk about how to actually create a debt profile. I'll link that below and link it in the description so you can check that out and at least get you started on figuring out what everything is looking like from a debt perspective. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.